Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Always ready to jump into these fascinating texts.
Well, today we're looking at Genesis 9.
Oh, an interesting one for sure.
It's right after the flood, Noah, the ark, all that. But we're going a bit deeper than just doves and olive branches this time.
Definitely. Lots to unpack in Genesis 9. It's a real turning point. We go from this world cleansed by the flood to, well, a whole new start for everybody.
Yeah. Humanity gets a second chance. And it's right here we see that whole covenant thing taking shape.
That's right, the covenant. It's a huge concept, not just in Genesis, but running through so much of the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Okay, but hold on. Before we get all theological, can we just break down what a covenant even is? I hear the word, but what's the real weight of it in this context?
You're right, good point. We should define our terms. In essence, you see, it's a solemn agreement between two parties.
Okay, makes sense, like a contract or something.
Sort of, but with a lot more weight to it. Often it involves promises, obligations, that sort of thing. But in this specific case, with God and Noah, it's more of a one-sided promise. God saying, look, I'm never going to flood the earth again. A big gesture of grace, considering what just happened.
So it's not just like, hey, my bad, no more floods.
Not at all. It's about setting up this totally new relationship between God and humans. One built on hope and second chances, really.
I can see how that idea carries through, with Abraham and all those other covenants down the line.
Exactly. Genesis 9 lays that foundation.
So how does all this covenant stuff actually play out in this chapter? What are the nuts and bolts of this agreement?
Well, right away, you see God blessing Noah and his sons. Tells them to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth back up again.
Hitting the reset button on humanity, all right, try not to stir it up this time.
Oh, exactly. But there's more. It's not just about repopulating. God gives humans dominion over animals, too.
And that's where we get permission to eat meat.
Which is kind of weird because before the flood, everyone was vegetarian, right?
You're right. That change has sparked a lot of debate. Some say it's just adapting to a harsher world. Others see it as, humans distancing themselves from nature, maybe?
Deep stuff. So even something as simple as what we eat has all these layers of meaning underneath.
Absolutely. And the Bible's full of that. What seems straightforward on the surface, you dig a little, and there's a whole world of interpretation.
All right, so we got the blessing, the multiplying, the animal stuff, the meat eating. What else is in this covenant deal?
Well, the big one, the most famous part, the rainbow.
Right. God's like, here's your reminder that I'm keeping my promise.
Exactly. That rainbow becomes the symbol of the covenant, hope, renewal, all that. And it's not just a religious thing either, it's universal.
You see it everywhere. Art, literature, even political movements use the rainbow. Pretty powerful for something that came from this ancient story.
It shows how these old stories still have power. They shape how we see ourselves, the world around us.
Totally. Okay, so we have this beautiful covenant, new beginning, all that good stuff. But then things take a turn, don't they?
Yeah, we go from the cosmic level to something much more human. And let's be honest, a bit messy.
Family drama time.
It's where we see, the darker side of humanity. Even after this whole flood, this fresh start, God's grace.
Like a cosmic joke almost. God promises this new beginning, and what's the first thing Noah does? Well, let's just say, not exactly saintly behavior.
Right, so the story tells us Noah plants a vineyard, makes wine, and, well, he gets drunk, ends up uncovered in his tent.
Vulnerable, yeah, but also kind of messed up, right? Not what you'd expect from the flood hero.
It's interesting. Raises questions about family, respecting your elders, maybe even some sibling rivalry in there.
For sure. And the other brothers, Shem and Japheth, they react so differently than Ham.
Total contrast, right? They take a garment, go backwards into the tent, cover their father without even looking.
Showing respect, even when Noah's not exactly at his best.
Exactly. It's like this moral dividing line between them and Ham. And that leads to the whole curse thing, of course.
Yeah, the curse on Canaan, Ham's son. That's a tough one. It's been used to justify some awful stuff throughout history. Slavery, racism.
Absolutely. A very difficult part of the text, no question.
But just on a textual level, I'm curious, why Canaan? Why not curse Ham directly? Seems a bit roundabout.
Yeah, it's puzzled people for ages. There are lots of theories, of course. Some say Noah was drunk, misdirected his anger.
So basically a drunken dad making bad decisions.
Maybe. Others see it as, showing how sin has a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Actions have consequences, not just for you, but for your kids and their kids.
Generational, huh? But still, it feels unfair to Canaan. He didn't do anything wrong.
To us, maybe.
Yeah.
But we got to remember, ancient cultures, They had different ideas about family responsibility. One person messes up, the whole group might suffer.
Makes sense. Different world back then. But still, this whole curse being used to justify slavery. How does that fit with a loving God?
Hard question, and no easy answers. It's crucial to acknowledge how this passage has been twisted over time, to prop up ideas that some people are just better than others, destined to be servants. That's totally against the idea of equality, human dignity, everything we believe in.
So we got to be careful how we read it, not project our own stuff onto the text. But are there other ways to understand the curse? Ones that don't lead to those awful conclusions?
We could look at the history. Canaan, back then, was known for its good land, its location, made it a target for conquest. So maybe the curse is less about slavery as a concept and more like predicting what will happen to Canaan politically.
So less about endorsing slavery, more about predicting that Canaan will get conquered.
That's one way to see it. And remember, reading any ancient text, gotta understand the context it was written in, not force our own ideas onto it.
Makes sense. And it kind of ties back to the covenant, doesn't it? It's an agreement, yeah, but both sides have responsibilities. God makes a promise, but human choices still matter.
Absolutely. That tension, divine grace, butting up against our flaws. It's all over the Bible. God saves humanity, but we still see people messing up, even in their own families.
Holding a mirror up to us, isn't it? Shows our potential for good, but also how we can hurt each other. Doesn't shy away from the mess.
Right on. Genesis 9, it makes us think about human nature, about justice, about how hope and sin kind of exist side by side, still relevant all these years later.
We've gone deep on this curse, that's for sure. Raised more questions than answers, probably. But before we move on, gotta circle back to Shem and Japheth. Noah doesn't just curse, he blesses them too. What's the deal with that?
Those blessings, they're important, part of the whole picture. But they've been used to justify stuff too, Political claims, theological debates.
So kind of like the curse, they've been twisted to fit certain agendas?
Exactly. Like the blessing on Shem, linking him to God. Some groups have used that to say, see, we're God's chosen people. But we got to be cautious, right? Those interpretations often say more about the interpreter than the text itself.
So again, we're reading too much into it, trying to force it to fit what we already believe.
Right. It's about family, lineage, power dynamics, all seen through the lens of the ancient world. We can't just ignore that.
This chapter is way more complex than I realized. Not just rainbows and floods. It's about us, our good and bad sides, God's justice, hope mixed with all the messed up stuff we do.
You got it. And it challenges us, makes us think, even thousands of years after it was written.
All right, I think we've covered a lot. Covenant, rainbow, family drama, the curse, those blessings. Anything else we got to hit before wrapping up Genesis 9?
There's this one bit people kind of gloss over, but it's important. The chapter ends by talking about how long Noah lived. All the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died.
Wait, we're talking about Noah's age now. I know those early Bible guys lived forever, but I always figured that was just like a side note. Why mention it here at the end of the whole chapter?
It's subtle, but it's like closing the loop, you see. The chapter starts with God telling Noah, go forth, multiply, refill the earth. And then by mentioning Noah's death, his crazy long life, it shows he did it. That whole command, it got done. It's the end of an era, really, from the flood generation to the ones who inherit the covenant.
Makes sense. Noah's the chosen one, yeah, but he's still human. Part of that whole life and death cycle we all go through.
Exactly. Ties into those big themes, History repeating itself, God's promise, but humans still mess up, and hope, even though we all die someday.
So even this little detail about Noah's age, it adds another layer. All this grand stuff, creation, covenants, judgment. But then there's still the simple fact of a guy living his life, dying, generations moving on.
Right, it brings it back down to earth. These stories, they're not just about abstract ideas, they're about what it means to be human. The good, the bad, the whole messy experience of being alive. That's why they still speak to us.
All right, I'm getting it. So we've covered the covenant, that awesome rainbow, the family drama, that tough curse, the blessings on the other brothers, even Noah's epic lifespan. We really did go deep. As we wrap up Genesis 9, what's the one big thing you want listeners to take away?
That this chapter, it's not a simple kid's story. It's asking profound questions about human nature, God, hope in the face of, everything life throws at us. It makes us think critically about our own beliefs. How to read these ancient texts, not just force them to say what we want. These stories, they still shape us, even today.
Couldn't agree more. And that contrast, that's what gets me, the hopeful covenant, but then this very human screw-up. It shows even with God's grace, our choices have power. They can affect us, our kids, even people way down the line.
It's that tension, right? We see it everywhere. Living up to our ideals when we're all imperfect. How do we do that?
The big question, huh? No easy answer. But Genesis 9, it says, even with all the mess, there's still hope. Redemption. Reconciliation, maybe even a future that actually lives up to that covenant promise.
A message we need now as much as ever, I think. We make mistakes, the world's got problems, but we can still work towards something better. Justice, compassion, all that.
Well said. Think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Genesis 9. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Hope you enjoyed exploring this with us. It's a story that, well, keeps you thinking about who we are and the hope we carry, even when things are tough.
Yeah, these texts, they're not just dusty old relics, they're alive, you know?
Yeah.
They make us ask those big questions that humans have always struggled with, and maybe by wrestling with them, we can find a way forward, a way to make the world a little bit better, a little bit closer to what we believe in.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep those conversations going.